Hey everyone, how you doing? We've got some interesting information to share with you today. We're going to be giving you a top 10 of ancient giants of Britain, all from this book, The Giants of Stonehenge and Ancient Britain, that's been written by myself, Hugh Newman, and my co-author here, Jim Vieira. Now, this big question is, did ancient giants really exist in the British Isles? Did they build the megalithic sites that we see all over the country? And also, why is it covered up? Why is there not more information in the historical record about this? Now, this is something myself and Jim have been investigating for years. Previously, in our last book, Giants on Record, where we looked at the American giants. But more recently, we've decided to come to my homeland, specifically the area around Stonehenge and the rest of the country. But there's a lot going on here that people don't realise, and we've been investigating antiquarian accounts, archaeological records, scientific reports, ancient texts from all four countries of the British Isles, and believe we have uncovered something quite remarkable that a lot of people haven't heard about. Some of the texts we did actually get access to were incredibly difficult to find, so we know much of this has not been published. There's also a wealth of folklore and mythology relating to giants. Even the founding of Britain is related to these giant human beings. And we must remember there's like a supernatural element to many of these stories, these founding myths that relate to these giants. We have like the Fomorians and the Firbolg, Tuatha Dé Danann of Ireland. We have Gog Magog and Bran of Britain, amongst others. And so we really need to kind of look at these from a different perspective, look at these myths and give them some kind of real insight about what they really mean. So we're going to do this top 10 for you. Jim's going to jump in with a few things here. It's not just me talking for the whole thing, but basically we wanted to do make it kind of fun, do like a chart, of all these different accounts. But before we do that, Jim just wants to quickly give a couple of insights and ideas about, what he's uncovered and what his angle is on this giant story in ancient Britain.
Yeah, I basically found a lot of parallels between the American story of giants and the Native American ideas of giants existing, ancient wars, cannibalistic giants, the heads of native tribes being 7 and 8 foot tall and possessing supernatural powers or shamanic powers. And we find the same thing in the British Isles, and the same accounts, like jawbone over the face, extra rows of teeth, 6 fingers and toes. These same anomalies that are tied to the idea of giants in a mythological sense are in the historical record once again, and even in the medieval texts, like the Yellow Book of Lecan and others. So it's a really, for me, a fan of mythology. It's stunning parallels, and I'll just say that. In the British Isles, it seems like almost the Druidic class or the priestly class were the tall ones, and the tall ones in the United States was like the super tall shamanic Native American class. So there are ideas of bloodlines being kept for thousands of years, and we in fact get into the genetics in Ireland, where the highest incidence of gigantism in the world is in Ulster County in the north of Ireland, where the Tuatha Dé Danann, who were known to be giant-sized, landed in mythological times. So that's just this blend of science and mythology, and that's what the book is all about.
So here we have now the top 10 giants of ancient Britain. So we'll get started on this. I'm going to kind of read out, this specific top 10, starting at a 7 foot tall giant, and then we work all the way down to number 1, which is completely remarkable. And we also have thrown in a number 0, and the reason we've done this is because Jim has done some deep research into unlocking a very famous hoax that has occurred here in the British Isles that many people have been talking about as a real discovery. So we'll look at that side of the argument as well. So let's begin. So top 10 giants of ancient Britain. So number 10, we have Cadiz Idris in Wales, where 2 7 foot tall skeletons were found in a burial with hazel rods unearthed at the base of the famous Sacred Mountain in 1685 by peat diggers. The mountain is the mythical home of Idris, the giant Idris, also known as Idris Gower. He was one of the three holy astronomers of the lands of Britain. The other one was Gwyn ap Nudd, and there was another third one as well. And he was also known as a renowned king who lived in the 6th century. And the interesting thing about Idris is that another translation of Idris is Enoch. And we found remarkable connections between the Bible lands, the stories of the Watchers and Enoch, and this particular Idris that is found in Wales. So Jim, what do you make of this one?
There's two 7-foot skeletons here, and they both have hazel rods, and that is what has been used throughout the ages for dowsing. So it looks like they were astronomer priests of this Idris caste, if you will. I won't say it's the original Idris. We don't know the dating on the skeletons, but it looks like there was a holy elite class that understood astronomy. And in fact, we do an entire chapter about the geomancy of the giants, how this megalithic science was brought over. Whether you believe in this idea of giants or not, it's pretty striking. The megalithic science, the understanding of energy currents, and the temple building that occurred 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 years ago in the British Isles. And that to me is more indication that this idea was understood and taken seriously in ancient times.
This one is very interesting. This is St Michael's Mount in Cornwall. And an 8-foot skeleton was discovered in the early 1800s on St Michael's Mount, actually within it, inside a narrow dungeon cut out of solid bedrock. This is now just the area where the crypt is, actually below the chapel that's actually on top of St Michael's Mount. We also have ancient myths from this area talking about Cormoran the giant, and the story states that he was killed by Jack the Giant Killer, which we know is a story, and this is from scientific research in recent times, proving that the story of Jack the Giant Killer and others go back to about 5,000 years. So these stories are very, very ancient, and the fact is you've got this really strong myth on this island, and you've got an 8-foot skeleton being discovered. And we've double checked this, and we've found multiple sources, including the National Trust handbook, proving that this really exists. I mean, what do you make of that, Jim?
Catches my attention is that the Jack the Giant Killer story, it goes back at least 5,000 years, verified by a team of academics. And that's a really wild idea that this isn't a strange superstition that was cooked up in the Middle Ages. It goes back deep into history. In fact, there are effigies in Salisbury, in London, that are paraded around, that are 10, 12 feet tall, that represent the foundings of Britain and the interwoven nature of giants. And Mount St. Michael's is another place where you have just this, you have ley lines, you have legends, you have giants throwing stones and geomantic placements of stones. And, that's what I think about it. It ties together the mythology with a real historical account that's been verified scientifically.
Number 8 is Lundy Island off the coast of Devon out in the Bristol Channel. This is a really interesting one. This is something that Jim discovered when we were looking through old records. And in 1856, 2 skeletons were discovered on the south part of the island in a place called Bull's Paradise. It's a big debate about whether there was 2 of these skeletons or 1. It looks like there was 2. One was 8'5" and the other one was 8'7". They were buried in stone-lined graves with several other human skeletons of average size. And old legends, rock-wielding giants who were masters of sorcery were said to be buried there, who were driven there from their bases in Cornwall, and that they angrily hurled rocks back to the mainland. And so Lund is interesting in its own right. It's known that it's got connections with Stonehenge because of the great lunation 5, 12, 13 Pythagorean triangle linking them up with Preseli Bluestone site in Wales. And it's got this legendary kind of mystical quality about it, where the Romans even spoke about this priestly elite who secretly lived there. And so it's got this really interesting kind of element to it that a lot of people don't know about. So Jim, when you found this discovery, it was quite surprising, especially that it was on a well-known site connected with Stonehenge.
Yeah, I in fact found several accounts of this. And I think this account specifically highlights how much work there is to dig out these old accounts. I think the document was 700 or 800 pages long. And I swear to God, I read through the whole thing, and I did that the same in the United States. All these town and county histories, these straightforward anatomical measurements are buried in these massive obscure documents, once again in a time of inefficient communication. So we've taken countless hours to dig through and bring these to light.
Here's just an image which I put up on the screen of an illustration of the actual burials on the island as well. So we've got quite a lot of information about this particular discovery.
And the mythology is that this was this land of giant sorcerers. And you say, oh, you know, that's a child's fairy tale. But then the archaeological record proves that there were giant beings there, 8'5", 8'7", 8'2", some of the accounts. So it's really interesting. Lundy is this mystical, isolated outpost, and that has these mythological ties.
Right, number 7 of the top 10. So this time we're not too far. We're actually on exactly the same latitude, and the line between Stonehenge actually connects up the site we're looking at now, which is Glastonbury Abbey. And this was recorded back in 1191 of a 9-foot skeleton that was unearthed. And the story states that the monks of Glastonbury Abbey announced a major discovery, claiming the skeleton of King Arthur had been discovered. Witnesses claimed it was 9 feet long, and next to it was a female skeleton with a blonde plait of hair still present in the burial, said to be Guinevere. There was a lead cross found about halfway down, about 7 feet below the surface, with the inscription claiming it was the burial place of King Arthur. And interestingly, nearby in one of the lake villages, a giant 7-foot yew wood longbow was unearthed, thought to have been used by the giants of this area. Now, this is an elaborate story, but the fact that it was witnessed by so many people at the time, and it was reburied in this whole pomp and ceremony, actually inside the abbey, because it was found just outside the abbey at the time when it was called St Dunstan's. And this is actually the image, a brilliant image that Yuri Leach has put together, showing the different versions of the history of what was discovered there. And the 9-foot skeleton seems to be possibly nothing to do with King Arthur, but actually it could have been one of a tribe of giants who were known to have lived in the area called the Kangig giants. What do you make of that, Jim?
We were at Glastonbury yesterday, actually, at the tour. We're in the holy white well underneath Glastonbury Tor with candles, and they have this whole, it's like this angelic realm. And it's amazing how many sacred sites have not only the myth and legend, but the actual historical accounts of these enormous figures being unearthed. And that to me is further verification that these people were in tuned, their mythology were part of the record that they wanted to share and they wanted to pass on. It was very important to them. It wasn't just infantile fairy tales. It was really important information.
So number 6, we head super far north to the islands of Orkney. Maze Howe is a major megalithic tomb dating to 2800 BC on the mainland Orkney. In 1861, it was reported that a 10-foot tall skeleton was found within the chamber, as well as 2 mummies. Another account from 1529 reveals that a 14-foot skeleton may have been unearthed, although this could be the same story repeated at different times. So this, to me, is fascinating. The fact we've got a major megalithic tomb. It was documented by well-known antiquarians at the time, and there's an earlier report of an even taller skeleton from the same area, which could be the same story. So the fact is, if this is real, this is one of the most interesting discoveries we've found in all of the British Isles.
Yeah, in Orkney, they have one of the highest incidences of haplogroup X amongst the population, which has been tied to this idea of a lost continent in the Atlantic. You know, Atlantis, Aegea, High Brazil. There's lots of myths in the British Isles about these lost lands like Lyonese. But it really, that genetic finding shows that there is a connection to, or a possible connection to the British Isles of these lost lands that are spoken about in mythology. And I'll also say that the Tuatha De Danann came from 4 island continents in the North Atlantic before they sank, and they brought all these magical tools and wisdom with them when they landed in Northern Ireland.
So we now stay in Scotland, and this is number 5 of the chart. This is an 11-foot skeleton from Duntell Brock in Glenelg, Scotland, which is a 2,000-year-old tower stone construction. In it, two remarkable skeletons were discovered, one approximately 8.5 feet tall and the other almost 11 feet tall. This is one of many of these kind of discoveries that are found in Scotland. And the area where they were found is called, amazingly, the Field of the Big Men. And so even the mythological landscape is recording what was found and what was reported in these ancient sites.
In that account, there's a reverend and a group of people from the town, and they take a skeptic with them to unearth this purported giant burial. And they find an 8.5 foot skeleton and an 11-foot skeleton. And they're so awestruck by the finds that the descriptions are like incomprehensible. And the jawbone is so large it fits over the face of everyone there with room to spare. And it matches up with all the accounts we found in the United States as well. Even looked at by, mainstream archaeologists like Don Dragoo and Webb and Snow in the 40s and 50s when they unearthed over 7-foot skeletons. They called it the Adena jaw. So that anatomic anomaly holds true in the British Isles, and it is laid out in all these accounts we found in the British Isles of jawbone over the face.
Now we move on to one of the most strange stories we've come across in our studies. This is number 4 of the top 10 giant chart. This is from a place called Dachul, County Mayo, Ireland, and a 12.5-foot skeleton was recorded. But the interesting thing is, it was St. Patrick who actually found this. We're talking about the kind of founding Christian kind of ancient Ireland who drove the snakes out from the land, apparently. And Glyn Daniel claims he was the first ever archaeologist, because in this story, whilst digging up an ancient grave, he discovered not only the skeleton, but also a giant sword and axe within the burial. And the story states that he tried to save the soul of this pagan giant by baptizing it, and it spoke to him and it came alive, and it then was taken off and went to heaven before the bones were broken up and the grave was destroyed and dispersed to cover up this story. But this was recorded in many, many different documents.
Yeah. Well, it looks like a little embellishment by the monks, but it's a 9th century document that Hugh talked about. Glyn Daniel, he's a well-known archaeologist from Cambridge University, and in a lecture he pointed to the 9th century account that this 12.5-foot skeleton was unearthed and associated with St. Patrick, and he called St. Patrick the first archaeologist of the British Isles. So that, a sober archaeologist weighing in on that is pretty interesting. I'll mention also that it was found with giant artifacts. Many of these accounts are with swords or Neolithic artifacts, just like in the United States. You have Native American artifacts buried in giant artifacts, buried with giant Native Americans sometimes. So one of the skeptics' arguments are these are mastodon bones or animal bones, and that's just a very weak argument when you read through the accounts.
So we're now on to number 3. This is a place called St. Bees in Cumbria, where a 13-foot 6-inch skeleton was unearthed in the early 1800s by a certain Hugh Hodson. And he found this when he was digging up local cornfields in this area, and it had full armor. It had a huge sword. Again, it had an axe and everything else associated with it. And it was described in great detail, and the finds were apparently distributed between the local kind of populace. So what happened to it, we don't know. But in this area, we find many, many stories, and we'll find that number 1 is actually from the northern part of Britain. So this seems to be where some of the tallest giants that we've uncovered actually exist.
Once again, this account is obscurely buried in a journal that was never known about, that we dug into and we found, just like in the American story of giants as well. They're not on the front page New York Times, although there were some of them. This isn't headline-grabbing information. This is extremely buried in these documents with genealogies and surveyors' remarks and all kinds of statistics. And we're to take to heart all this, all the stats that are laid out about boundary markers and everything. But I guess we're not supposed to believe the standard measurements that were given by anthropologists of the time, scientists of the time, doctors of the time. And that's the thing that draws us into the mystery, is like, how can so many people with common sense, trained in the art of observation, cannot measure these things that are known to the common populace, like a massive jaw or a femur bone? So as you read through this book, hopefully you'll get it. You will understand our drive and enthusiasm for this story.
So we're now at number 2, and this is where we get super local, to me anyway. This is from very close to Stonehenge, just in the area of Salisbury, current day Salisbury. And here we have multiple reports from this area, but this is the one that really stands out, of a 14-foot, 10-inch skeleton reported in the early 1500s. And actually it was author, diplomat and scholar and MP for Cambridge, Sir Thomas Eliot, who witnessed this and was involved in the discovery with his father when they were digging up a site called Ivy Church Priory. It was found in a huge oak coffin, and in the coffin itself, at the feet of the giant, was found this strange ancient book with this unusual inscription on it, which even Thomas Eliot couldn't understand, couldn't kind of decipher. Also nearby, they found this giant tin and lead disc with the same kind of inscriptions on it. That's completely disappeared, so no one knows what was on it, what language it was. And so this is just one of the mysteries of this site. But we also have William Camden, John Leland and others who witnessed this and wrote about this back in the 1500s. We must remember, and Jim will talk about this, that this time in the 1500s, early 1500s, there was explorers going to America, to Patagonia and other areas, witnessing live giants and buried giants in these areas. So it was kind of like a time when there was like a wave of giantology taking place.
Absolutely. That all the explorers you can name, DeSoto, Vespucci, Drake, John Smith, from Virginia to Patagonia, encountered 7, 8, and 9 foot tall native chiefs. They talked about when the youth of these tribes were on their knees, they towered over the tallest men. And the mainstream approach is that, oh, the Spanish were 5'2" and the natives were 5'7", and that may be true for the general population, but they describe these absolutely enormous native chiefs in very exquisite detail. So you come over to Stonehenge and you have the first representation of Stonehenge was a 12th century tapestry with King Ambrosius, Merlin, and a giant building the lintels. And the first name in Welsh was the Giant's Dance of Stonehenge. So you have all these lines of evidence coming together. Then you have a 9'4" skeleton found in the Stonehenge area and a 14'10" one. So everything comes together once again. It's not just one random myth or account. It's basically a coming together of multiple lines of evidence.
So we're now at number 1, the top 10, number 1. Here we go. So this is called the Core Giant, or the Corbridge Giant, found in Northumberland, up in the north of England. And this is a stunning discovery from 1660 that was 21 feet tall, according to the estimations of the discoverers. It was near sections of Hadrian's Wall, so some people suggest this was possibly Roman, but we think it could be much earlier. And in the 1800s, another giant skull was found in the area, which kind of helped verify this kind of claim. And the actual rib bone of this particular 21-foot giant was actually on display at the Keswick Museum in Cumbria, along with many other finds relating to giants, including a 10-foot skeleton, also another 7-foot one potentially, and we go into all these in the book in more detail. But the fact is that it was recorded there, it was reported on, it was measured, and this is, it's got quite a lot of evidence to back this up. So the fact is, we didn't find anything even this tall in North America. The tallest we got there in Giants on Record was 18 feet. And so, we've kind of topped that by 3 feet. So if this is a reality, we don't know. It was found so long ago, but it's just compelling to say the least. And we just hope this kind of top 10 has kind of given you some insights into what has been going on here in Britain.
Yeah, I want to jump in and say, I know you talking 18, 20-foot tall skeletons, you're like, these guys are out of their mind, but we're not saying that, we have the evidence and we've DNA tested it. This mystery doesn't get solved until they find over 10-foot skeleton and DNA test it. We're laying out the case and trying to make a theory that there was a story here. Hugh just mentioned an 18-foot tall skeleton that was found in Pennsylvania, or purported to be found. It was reported to have double rows of teeth, as well as so many others in the United States in this era of inefficient communication. these accounts are buried very obscurely. And in fact, in the Giants of Wales, in 200 AD, there is an account, the time of Hadrian the Emperor in Messina, I believe, where Ida the giant was raised 20 foot tall, double sets of teeth, back and front. And that is how it was laid out in this 200 AD account, that this 20-foot tall skeleton had double sets of teeth, just like the 18-foot tall one in the 1800s in Pennsylvania. So we're not saying we have all the answers, and we're not anti-scientific, but when you read through all these accounts, you come around to the idea that there seems to be a pretty significant story here.
There is another side to this story which fascinates us, and this is the mythology. This is the founding stories of Britain. We have Gog Magog and the Brutus the Trojan. We have the story of Bran. We have much, much more. We have even like Albina, who was like a giantess herself, coming over from Greece, mating with these kind of demonic entities called the incubi and giving birth to races of giants. We also have Albion, of course. And so there's hundreds, possibly thousands, probably potentially tens of thousands if we go locally. There's so many of these stories, so many of these myths of giants building these sites all across the country. But, you know, one of the things we found, and one of the things we did in our last book, and we continued into this book, is look for hoaxes, look for deceptions, look for exaggerations, and expose them. And we're not 100% believers. We actually want to kind of, you know, bring the truth out about this story in a comprehensive and a thoughtful manner, without kind of pushing beliefs and ideas on anybody. And so one of these is what we call in the chart number 0, and there's a reason for that. Is because it was one of the biggest hoaxes ever recorded in the world of giantology.
I'll take it. Actually, this account alone took me months to dig through mountains of literature to find the truth of it. The giant of Antrim was purported to be found in 1895. It was mentioned with a picture in the Strand magazine. It's 12 foot 6 inches tall. It's laid up in a photograph next to a railroad car. And it was purported to be a biblical giant with 6 toes, just like the giant of Gath. So I've dug into this to figure out the truth of the matter. And what I was able to uncover was that an Italian sculptor, stone carver, Giuseppe Sala, who was involved in the Cardiff giant hoax in New York State, was the one who carved this with a team of hoaxers looking for a payoff, because you would have to pay money to get that. So what we uncovered was that Sala and his son purported at least 7 different hoaxes. 2 marble men in Australia in the 1890s, the Cardiff giant itself, the solid Muldoon hoax in Colorado, a fake giant in Los Angeles, New Hampshire, and I believe there's a couple other. And the moral of the story is that, you know, there was a lot of New York Times articles that I had to dig through to really find these guys and piece together all the pictures of the past. But, you know, there's 2 camps in this debate. There's like the pseudo-skeptics who are immune to objectivity, and then the true believers sometimes get roped in by things they want to believe. There's an overwillingness to believe. So we try to meet in the middle. I've believed things in the past that ended up not being true, and it kind of sobered me up to really want to dig into a story. So the Antrim giant, it was kind of cool. We debunked this thing that hasn't been known about for over 100 years. And it's covered in the book like so many of these mysteries. That doesn't diminish at all the idea that we believe there's some truth to the story of giants in the past. And you know, I appreciate you listening to this. I think it's a really cool book, and we don't take ourselves seriously, but we do take the research seriously, at least in the collation of all these accounts and the presentation of evidence to let the reader decide.
So thanks for watching. We appreciate your time. We just wanted to kind of give you this top 10, going all the way from 10 to 0. I'm just going to quickly run through these again, just the titles. So we have number 10, Cadet Idris, Wales, 7 foot. Number 9, St Michael's Mount, Cornwall, 8 foot. Number 8, Lundy Island, 8 foot 7 inches. Number 7, Glastonbury Abbey, 9 foot. Number 6, Maze Howe, Orkney, 10 foot. Number 5, Glenelg, Scotland, 11 foot. Number 4, Dushill, County Mayo, Ireland, 12 foot 6. Number 3, St Bees, Cumbria, 13 foot 6. Number 2, Stonehenge, Salisbury, Wiltshire, 14 foot 10 inches. And number 1, The core giant, Northumberland, 21 feet. And of course, number 0, the Antrim Irish giant. And so that just gives you an outline, a brief indication of what we've been looking at in this book. And really, if you're interested in giants, if you're interested in megalithic sites, in mythology, into geomancy, the kind of mystical side of ancient history, this book delves into all these subjects, because this is the nature of this study. It's not just about proving skeletons existed. There's a whole other world, like a supernatural realm, where this all was happening in, coinciding with what's being discovered in the ground and in these giants' tombs. So please check out The Giants of Stonehenge in Ancient Britain. You can get it on Amazon. It's on the megalithomania.co.uk website. We have a Facebook page called The Giants of Stonehenge. And if you like it, please do leave a review on Amazon. We'd really appreciate it. So thank you very much, all you giantologists watching this. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.